What is going on, everyone? Matt here for GR Weekly and GridironRatings.com, talking about recapping the Thursday Night Football game, Bengals and the Jaguars, as well as picking up of the few 1 p.m. games we didn't cover on Wednesday, as well as the rest of the games for the NFL Sunday, including the 4 p.m. Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football game. We have around 11 games to talk about today, a very packed episode, kind of like where normally is our Wednesday show is our packed one. This one has a lot of games to talk about. So we're going to be diving right into it and be wasting no time. But if you like this, please like, subscribe, comment. We do have the live chat. A few of you pop in there. And if you do like any of this, subscribe over on the YouTube channel, as well as follow me at Methodical1 on Twitter. We're going to be also, I think, in audio format as well soon only. So over on the Google Podcasts and all those random sites like that. So just stay tuned for that. If that's something you would prefer to be listening to and not seeing my face, which is understandable. It's fine. Get it. But Jacksonville versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati wins this game 24-21. A lot of injuries, unfortunately, happened in this one. Some wacky things going on. Going to be starting over on that Jacksonville side, though. Unfortunately, Deontay Johnson fractured ankle, out indefinitely. They've not said that he'd be having any sort of season-ending sort of situations going on there. But for right now, that's kind of what we're leaning to, especially that we don't believe Jacksonville will be competing for a playoff spot, anything like that. So it needs Chark later on in the season. So unless he comes back with maybe a month to spare, unfortunately, looking like DJ Chark will not be seen again this season. So for Laviska Shenault, Marvin Jones, and James Robinson, arrow is pointing up for them. Shenault, the biggest benefit in this game with 30% target share. Him and really James Robinson were the only players over on the Jacksonville side. They were able to get much quality fantasy production of, Marvin Jones, unfortunately, 3 targets, 24 yards in this one. But Laviska Shenault with a big night, around 100 yards, as well as James Robinson, 80 yards and 2 scores. So we're going to be honing in on James Robinson. So with those 2 touchdowns, big night for him. I had him just outside my top 12 when Carlos Hyde was deemed inactive due to a shoulder injury that he was not feeling well when he got to the stadium on it. So they held him out of this game. Season lows, unfortunately, though, for him in both targets and receptions, but season high in snaps. So on paper, Robinson for me is someone that I'm looking at as a top 15, 18 running back on the rest of the season. Position that right now we're not seeing good quality play, 20-something players deep. We're going to be talking about a few players that are accounting for over a guy like Saquon Barkley in terms of total points scored. There's just not a lot of points being scored with players in and out of lineups, inconsistent play across the board. So I have only a few players actually right now even scoring more than 50 points at the position in full PPR. So there's just not a lot of good, consistent play there. But Trevor Lawrence was an encouraging spot here for them. No turnovers in this game, but it's now the 3rd straight game with less than 220 passing yards and only 1 score, a rushing score in this one. If Shenault and Jones are going to be the 2 primary options for him, at the very least, it's an uptick in terms of what we can think of them going into the year for the rest of the season. Shenault was a player that was not droppable, was very much on the fringe of being one of the worst players on your roster. Marvin Jones was the only receiver we had any sort of hopes for, but it's a big spot for Shenault for sure. Do I think that it's going to be Shenault over Jones the rest of the year? It's kind of hard to say right now, considering for the first few weeks of the season, Marvin Jones was the only player of the receiving group, and really just James Robinson until last week that we had any sort of confidence in. But going forward, at least if we have 3 quality options and Robinson, Shenault, and Jones to be at least flex to startable options in a consistent basis, we like to see those sort of things. There's not as many players like that going around right now. Other than the Cincinnati side, Joe Mixon was hurt late in this game. No real sort of big inclination as to what the issue is. If he's going to be missing time, Smudgy P. Ryan was a player who popped up in a few spots in this game. That's not particularly something I'm very interested in. I understand starting running back is a starting running back is a starting running back, but Samaje Perine, we would like Joe Mixon to be rocking and rolling and healthy, because for him right now, it's a case of total up and down sort of play with him. He's had the only carries for anyone as a running back over the last 2 weeks, in weeks 2 and 3. But in this week, obviously with the injury, P. Ryan gets in there, but only, one after the 4-target week 1 has combined for 5 targets over the last 3 weeks. That's something that's very odd to see, because we not only thought of him as a heavy carry back and you chase workload and you chase that you get the opportunity to score and be consistent fantasy producers. But when you're not receiving, if you're playing in any sort of PPR format, those are very valuable points that you're missing out on. So in this offense, if head coach Zach Taylor is not using Joe Mixon like that, that is a big issue for us in terms of what its overall upside is going to be. Because going into this week, we looked at him as for such myself, I ranked him as a top 5 back. And that was pretty consistent with most of the other Fantasy Pros rankers as to where he would be going as a producer for this week. But if he's not going to be getting those targets, then the people who are naysayers on his overall production for the year are going to be a little more right, because rushing can only get you so much if you're not having an extreme amount of carry production like guys like Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb do, but they also add on touchdowns on top of that. Big talk tonight was obviously CJ Uzomah. 95 yards, 2 scores. Fortunately, you probably did not play against CJ Uzomah. He was rostered in less than like 1%, 2% across most of the main sites. Only 28 rankers even ranked Uzomah in week 4. I was not one of those. But between him, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, all impress here in week 4. Boyd continues to be, I think, a good option as long as Higgins out. We understand that Jamar Chase was not going to have a 30-yard touchdown or more in every single game. Did come into this week with at least three type of those touchdowns through the first 3 weeks. So not getting the long touchdown is a little unfortunate for obvious purposes. But the ranking of him as a top 15 receiver for the week was definitely not an inconsideration. No, that was definitely the right way to go. Just hoping they came down with a score. Unfortunately, he did not do so. One thing I will say, I'm a little optimistic for the entirety for this Cincinnati offense. After 10 sacks in the first 2 games on Joe Mixon, only 1 sack and 3 QB hits over the last 2 weeks for this Cincinnati offensive line. Something of really optimism for him, definitely for Joe Burrow, but also the entirety of the Cincinnati offense. I just have to cough for 1 second. Excuse me. All right. So we're getting into fall here. So I guess I'm picking up a little bit of throat congestion, and active to talk for an hour long does not make that any better. So game we got to pick up from the 1 o'clock time frame that we did not get to on Wednesday. Starting off with Cleveland versus Minnesota. Cleveland favored by 2 points, 51.5 point over under. Starting with the Cleveland side, one big thing here is Kareem Hunt. So you're starting Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb for sure. But Hunt, not as I'm quite lower on him, and there's some stuff to back that up. So for fantasypros.com, I had a little bit of a contributing piece in their buy low and sell high article that came out the other day. Check for that over on fantasypros.com. But run back 24 in the week for me. So for a player that's currently looked at as a top 10 running back in terms of points scored, he doesn't have the peripheral sort of stuff for me to consider him as such, though. 54% of his total fantasy points came from the 1 game, his week 3 performance. 32nd currently in running back carries. For him being RB7 on the year in full PPR, he's had just a kind of a bit of good luck go his way in a game where Chicago was not competitive at all, and they just decided to just use him in a big way and get big fantasy points there in week 3. And it kind of showcases to the position as a whole. There's a lot of bad running back play right now. So when you have guys like Kareem Hunt, who are definitely outproducing where they should be considered on a weekly or the year rest of season basis, I consider him one of the easiest trade away and sell high options currently in the NFL. So we're looking at running backs, right? With it being a bad spot as a whole, currently 43 receivers have outscored the running back 24 in full PPR, who is currently Saquon Barkley. It's not a dig against Barkley. It's just a dig against the running back position as a whole. Some of those players, though, Jacoby Myers, Rondale Moore, KJ Osborne, Zach Pascal, these are all players outscoring Saquon Barkley and a good portion of other running backs. It's just a bad position. When you have a guy like Hunt, who is definitely outpacing what he should be doing, that is a easy sell for me, for sure. Also, kicker Daniel Carlson for the Las Vegas Raiders, outscoring all but 16 running backs. That's just how bad running back has been as a whole. Great spot here for OBJ as well. 30% target share in his first week active in in 2021. Like him here against Minnesota. And Austin Hooper, I think, is in a nice stream spot. Minnesota did allow some big numbers to Max Williams, who's been kind of a very, very, very not great tight end for Arizona for a few years. So if Max Williams is able to go and have a big game against Minnesota, at least gives me some sort of hope for Austin Hooper to do so, as well as I did rank David Njoku as well for those purposes if we're just that poor at tight end. Moving on to the Minnesota side. First real test for the Minnesota offense here. And that is our one big thing. How does this team produced in, against Arizona, Seattle, and Cincinnati, who I don't believe are on the same tier as Cleveland. Cleveland did outpace themselves for sure with that 9 sack, 50 total yards performance that they had against the Chicago offense in week 3. And it's hard to really state what their overall strength is, because it's, when the points per versus position numbers, it's going to be kind of skewed. They're one of the best against quarterbacks and receivers right now because just nothing went on it for a whole week. So can't really say about that. But Kirk Cousins just outside my top 12. Prefer Rodgers to him. Prefer guys like Derek Carr. If you have Cousins, I'd start with guys like Ryan Tannehill, Sam Darnold, all this stuff like that. Very high end quarterback 2. Low end quarterback 1, you might be in a spot where he is your starting quarterback for the week. Don't hate it. Fine by me. Dalvin Cook is on track to play this week. Question about the ankle injury. If he is active, you are starting him. Is he a top 5 running back? Possibly not. Is he a top 12? Probably yes. But if he is not, Alexander Mattison will once again be in a top 20 spot for running back because it is a bad position right now. Always a possibility of Cook nursing the ankle through the game. So if you're in a desperation spot, right now Mattison is a top 20 running back. If Cook were to be active, I still probably start Cordell Patterson over him, and he's my running back 31 right now. So it's 32 ahead of guys like Tony Pollard and Damian Harris in that Tampa Bay game over up there in New England, where I do not want to start a running back against Tampa Bay pretty much ever. So that's where I'd be slotting him in if Cook were to be active for Madison. Outside of those guys, Jefferson and Thielen starts as always. Thielen very much having a Adam Thielen type year. He's currently 36th in yards of position, second in scores in the entire NFL. Feels like what Thielen has been doing. It's just Cooper Kupp with 5, him with 4. He scores a lot of touchdowns. He gets you the big points. The good amount of receptions, though. He's top 10 in receptions. So it's not like he's just doing it in completely fluky ways. But him scoring, we like to see that. It's Cleveland stats. Again, we can't really use their defense first position for wide receivers because that Chicago game really skewed a lot of the overall stats for this Cleveland defense. Other than that would be the only guys I want to start for them. Indianapolis versus Miami. Miami's favored by 1.5. One of the lower totals on the day, 43, starting on the Indianapolis side. The one big thing is the running backs, because the only really starts in this game, the running backs, and Michael Pittman. He's inside my top 36. Like him with the amount of work he's been getting, not a love, but I think he is a startable player for sure. He's been the favorite target so far of Carson Wentz. But Hines 3 red zone carries in a score compared to Taylor's current 0 for 7 from inside the 5. Hines 3 carries within the red zone last week. Jonathan Taylor only the 1 carry. Taylor's outscored him in 2 of the 3 games and has a very large lead on carries, 42-16. Of the 7 targets in week 1, though, Taylor is only 2 of the last 2 weeks compared to Hines' 16 on the season. In PPR purposes, that is very valuable work if you're seeing any sort of receiving numbers like Hines currently is. They've combined for only 1 score, so it's not like either of them really showcase that they're that much better the option. That's kind of definitely an insult to Jonathan Taylor, who should be looked at as a top 12 running back, one of the worst producers currently in terms of ADP from the preseason. At least for running backs, that is. Outside guys like Dalvin Cook who had to miss a game. But they combined for only 1 score. But Miami allowed 100-plus yards of Peyton Barber last week. So it's a massive make-or-break moment for not only Jonathan Taylor, but Hines as well. Because if whoever outproduces the other, we're going to have a good amount of confidence going into week 5. And if it's Nyheim Hines, that is a big, big problem for Jonathan Taylor, people. Because Taylor should be the lead back. He should be the main producer on the ground, and he should be looking at a little bit more through the air. He was looked at a good amount in that first week, and then he kind of just disappears in that regard. So this is a very big game for these running backs for sure against the Miami defense that can allow a good amount of yardage on the ground if they so deem so. Oh, man, I got definitely Something going on my throat right now. Got a little bit of nasal drip. All right. Over to the Miami side. One big thing is Myles Gaskin. It's all about the running backs in this game because, outside of Brissett, who I'm just going to make a quick note on, but his target share with Mike Gesicki, 25% target share to Gesicki in week 3, compared to 14% for Gesicki in week 2 and 11% for week 1. Just something to look at. Gesicki right outside my top 12. So that's the only real note on really Brissett. But Gesicki is something I'm really looking at to see if he can be pushing, if he can see target numbers like that again. Well, we kind of need as bad as running back has been, tight end has been worse. So we just need a little bit of something to kind of give us confidence in a lot of these tight end players, which we're not seeing right now. But to Gaskin, our main focus here. Gaskin has been unable to eclipse 80 total yards through 3 games. I'd like to see a little bit of a better showing here because week 5 he gets Tampa Bay. So you're sitting him next week, basically, no matter what. But needs some sort of spark for him to be confident after week 5. Because if he doesn't showcase in week 5, we understand Tampa Bay. He does have the receiving outlook that he can still be somewhat of a quality player for you, but I've basically just been looking at Tampa Bay and erasing whoever it is that plays running back. That it's just not a spot that I like looking at. But Indianapolis, definitely a team that can give up points, not only to running backs, to receivers as well. Currently the 7th easiest wide receiver matchup in the league. And, the issue is they have played some very good wide receivers, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown. These are very excellent receivers week in, week out. At least, a half of those last guys because, Brown and Julio missed a half in the week 3 game. And unfortunately, Tyler Lockett and Metcalf and Cooper Kupp did well, but Woods did not. So whatever it may be. Waddle is my preference of all the Miami receivers. Fuller, a boomer bust option for me. I want to get a little bit more of consistency in this Miami offense until I can recommend them as real, true, no doubt sort of guys. I'd like to see Tua back as well, but unfortunately, he's still currently out. This is another reset game. Kansas City versus Philadelphia, one of the better games on the docket for sure. Kansas City favored by a touchdown, and they need this one because they are down 1-2 in the record right now. 54.5 point over under. Starting on the KC side, one big thing is Tyreek Hill against his number 1 pass defense because Mahomes and Kelsey were always starting, yada, yada, yada. But Tyreek Hill has had a little bit of an issue of scoring fantasy points at the moment. Sub 10 points in full PPR the last 2 weeks. Currently, Philadelphia is the lowest in allowed receiving yards to receivers. The only team with under 300 yards allowed to position, like the whole position. And it's not just number 1 guy, it's the whole crew, right? Only 4 teams have allowed fewer touchdowns there too, as they are one of the lowest there, fewest in receptions, but they're always also the fewest in targets. Currently, Philadelphia is not having a lot of passing work done against them. They're 7th worst right now to running backs in fantasy points allowed, but the best to receivers. And there's a few things for that. 1, Atlanta was not competitive in week 1. That game got very gross very quickly. 2, the San Francisco game was an offensive nightmare. No one was able to get a good amount of production on either side of the ball, outside of one big Quez Watkins, 75-yard reception, which I don't think they even scored on. And 3, that Monday Night Football game against Dallas, you have guys like, CeeDee Lamb going down at the 1, and then you have Dalton Schultz take over, and there's a bunch of weird touchdowns all over the place that are even to receivers. Weird spot. But so far, they're not allowing a good amount of receiver production. And you have the receiver in Hill, who has been struggling over the last few weeks, and now technically gets the worst matchup you can possibly have. He is still inside my top 5. This is still the Kansas City offense. That's still Patrick Mahomes. Hill is healthy. Kelsey is like the wide receiver 3 on the season because he's just so ridiculous at playing at tight end. But this is a very odd matchup on paper, and I think these numbers are all a little wrong. So I'm not going to say that it's like, just avoid Hill. Now, if they do well against Tyreek Hill, there's some justification as to what's going on. But as to this point, definitely something to at least watch out for Hill because he's been inconsistent after having 200 yards in week 1 and then struggling the last 2 weeks. Clyde Edwards-Helaire after an easy matchup against LA, still a top 20 running back in a spot here against one of the bottom run defenses in the NFL currently through 3 weeks. Again, it's just been a little weird because they've given up nothing into receivers and through the air. But I do like Clyde Edwards-Helaire again, hoping he still gets some involvement in the passing game. Over to Philadelphia. We just need some offensive consistency because this is a game that I like really all of the Philadelphia players. Jalen Hurts inside my top 7. Sanders is a top 15 type back. Smith is inside my top 24. Jalen Reagor is inside my top 45. Kansas City defense allowing the second most points and the third most yards in the league and third most first downs as well. Their offensive and defensive numbers scored and allowed are almost identical, really across the board. It's crazy. They're one of the highest scoring teams, one of the most first down acquiring teams, and they're just getting a ton of yardage, but they're also allowing a ton of yardage scoring in first down. So it's very something to see that they're just very strong on both sides on offense, but very poor on the other side of the ball. So they're allowing to big scores for both teams. So right now, Kansas City is the team to stream people against, to get players in if you're confident in them. Love Jalen Hurts. Love the rest of the Philadelphia players. Even guys like Zach Ertz. He's one of the higher end tight end 2s, I think, on the week. Dallas Goedert inside my top 12. I don't believe Ertz will outscore Goddard like he did last week, and that's mostly just because of the touchdown. But I think he's a fine tight end too, and I think both Eagles tight ends do come away with good games here to the respective ranks for sure. Moving on to Arizona versus the LA Rams. Now, this is one of the other games where I think the over/under and the spread's a little wrong. The other one was the Washington game, but Washington only favored by 1.5 over Atlanta. Rams were favored by 4.5 and a 54.5 point over/under. Starting on the Arizona side, a sneaky part of me thinks that Arizona undersells in this one. Is on paper, this is the highest over/under of the week, or tied for it with the Kansas City game we just went over. But outside of that game, where I think there's a lot of good offense to be held, the LA Rams are a very, very good defense, and they just showcased that by beating, excuse me, Tampa Bay. So Murray must start. Top 5 for me. And again, it's I don't want to say it's a lock, but with him being so crafty, able to run, able to get away from sacks and move himself around. Aaron Donald is a crazy defensive lineman, but if Murray can roll out and make it harder for him to be brought down and extend plays, that's when things start going from NFL football to backyard football, and it's just everyone just starts running around, and it makes it so much harder for the defense to really be able to play just regular NFL football defense. So it's really going to be an issue for me here if the Rams don't get to Murray. It'd be good for us for fantasy people because we want big scores, right? We like stats. Hopkins inside my top 12. Hopkins has yet to reach 100 yards on the season, under 55 in the last 2. Still top 12 for me, but he's not a top 5 sort of guy. And a lot of my fellow rankers are also looking at that way. The rest of the Cardinals, in terms of priority, Chase Edmonds, top 24, especially if he's going to get the receiving work that we're hoping he's going to have. Then a good drop down to Kirk and Moore's top 50, and with James Conner and AJ Green not really being in consideration for starts. The issue is that we saw this last week where myself and many others were ranking Rondale Moore very highly and Hopkins as a top 5 receiver against Jacksonville. And then you had Christian Kirk and AJ Green have 100-yard games, and we didn't even have a touchdown from Kyler Murray. Now, that was because of this rushing scores from James Conner. But here, this is another part where I'm looking at the game where if Arizona doesn't go out and score 30 points, or have a dramatic, 24, they don't have 3 touchdowns or higher. I get it, because we just saw this happen with a team, I think, of the same offensive quality in Tampa Bay. So it's just something to very much consider when we're looking at, don't just blindly start guys, or in my case, rank guys. I'm doing pretty well right now, 63rd for Fantasy Pros. I'm nailing quarterbacks, top 16 for that. So there's one thing I'm nailing right now is quarterbacks. So I'm just saying, don't have Kyler Murray as like number 1 on the week or anything like that. Moving over to the Rams side, though. It's Robert Woods. Robert Woods are one big thing for sure. We got to start off with Stafford and Kupp. Must start for sure. Cooper Kupp, currently the number 1 player in fantasy football in terms of scoring in full PPR, is the only player over 90 points. But Robert Woods currently within my wide receiver 30. Let me see where I actually landed on him, because he's a guy where I've moved him around like 3 or 4 times. He is currently wide receiver 25. I'm don't know what to make of the Allen Robinson situation going over in Chicago. Deontay Johnson, I think I'm actually going to move ahead of him right now. So Woods will drop down to 26 because Johnson looks like he is going to be playing in that Pittsburgh game. We had to get some news on that one because you don't know exactly who's going to be in or out for Pittsburgh right now. But so wide receiver 26. If he falters, if he's not a good play this week, it's mission critical. It's DEFCON 1, Panic City. If you want to trade him away, you want to drop him, whatever you want to do. I wouldn't, but I get it. Because no matter what I say, people are going to be mad. This is a guy they wanted to be doing. Because they look at what Cooper Kupp does and they think, well, Robert Woods could be doing just that. Right now, Cooper Kupp is getting completely wide open on like 3-4 plays a game. So it's just, he's got some crazy luck on his side. I don't know what to go. He's been touched by an angel. He is playing out of his mind, and Robert Woods has not been able to do much of anything. But Tyler Higbee has also played into that because he's been being a top 12 tight end in the season. I rank him as such here as well. But Darrell Henderson has been cleared to play this week. Back as a top 24 option for me, even though that's really not saying much. Sonny Michel, I like to sit him if I could, as I think all the work he's going to be getting, if he gets a good amount of anything, it's just be rushing work, and it's going to be very not valuable rushing work, which is what I expected for him to be doing kind of whenever he is active. But now him getting more inclined to the system, being familiar, how much work he's going to be getting, where he's going to be looked at in game situations, that's very important in this game for future purposes. All right, we got like 6 games left. Seattle versus San Francisco. San Francisco favored by 2.5, 52-point over-under. Starting over on the Seattle side, one big thing here is going to be Tyler Lockett's health, because he is questionable right now for sure with the injury, with the hip injury from week 3. We're starting the main 3 of Carson and Wilson and Metcalf. Metcalf currently my top 10, gets a little bit more of a bump if Lockett is to miss this game. Also a little bit of possibly an uptick for Chris Carson, right? Under 15 touches in back-to-back weeks. Currently career best rushing, 4.9 yards per attempt, but he's not getting as much work as we would kind of want him to. He has 3 touchdowns in the season, though, to very kind of balance those out. We want him to be a workhorse back. The unfortunate part is Seattle has had very quick drives. They're one of the lowest plays ran in the NFL currently, because they're just kind of getting lucky through the 3 weeks. That's the one thing I've been saying for them. They just be a lot of large touchdown passes going on in short drives, whether it's successful or not. They're not having sustained drives. That's an issue for guys like Chris Carson, who's not getting a good amount of touches. I do like him here against San Francisco. Not exactly a particularly great matchup, but with Chris Carson, there's not really much of anything else going on in that backfield of note. But if Lockett is in, great top 15 type receiver like we normally have him. If he's out, a little bit of an uptick to the other guys. Downgrade for Wilson, though. That would be a downgrade for Wilson. Over to San Francisco, though. Kittle is currently questionable. Mitchell and Sermon are a little bit of a mess in that backfield. I'd rather not start either of them. And it's a problem is that the issue here being is this is a great matchup. Seattle has been a very bad defense. If Kittle is good to go, great. We don't even know who's the starter right now for the running backs. I'm ranking Sermon ahead of Mitchell, but whatever. Because one of them's going to have a good game, and it's going to be whichever one I don't rank higher or don't start or do whatever. That's just what's going to happen. We just all know this. Samuel and Ayuk, though. Samuel inside my top, right around top 15, and Ayuk is inside my top 30. We have some hope here with Ayuk, but I don't want to be pushing the envelope too quickly against the Seattle defense that is allowing fantasy points just all over the place. Ayuk, possibly back in the good graces. 3 red zone targets in week 3 compared to Samuel's 1 on the entirety of the season. He does have a rushing attempt, though, outside that 1 red zone target back in week 1. But Ayuk, I really want to have hope that we can start him as a wide receiver 2 with confidence. Hopefully we can build on that, because again, Seattle is a defense that we can really just do whatever they want to for opposing offenses. I just kind of hope San Francisco bounces back a little bit here at home against Seattle in a big spot here in this divisional game. Catch-up game here, Baltimore versus Denver. Denver is favored by a point, 44-point over-under. This is a defensive battle. This is one of the more boring games on the slate, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, as it's just you're going to be starting every single week sort of guys. Over on Baltimore, Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson. You can start Marquise Brown if you want, but he's just a wide receiver 3 or 4 option, so that's up to your real roster construction. So some guys starting over Marquise Brown, both all 3 Buffalo receivers really. Ayuk that we just talked about. Robert Woods, Allen Robinson. That I don't like this game. This seems like a very boring game. And we don't like boring games. We like explosions. We like fantasy points. We like guys going for 80-yard scores, none of this stuff. Melvin Gordon is currently a top 12 running back on the year. And the issue is that I think he's just an RB3. I am sitting him in a spot for Naheem Hines. I just really do not like this game. I think it's a very straightforward defensive battle. Not too many players here that I'm expecting big games from. I do want to see what Cortland Sutton and Teddy Bridgewater, their connection looks like when they're not in situations where they're just playing dud defenses and dud offenses, really, because the one thing for Denver, they've had a very soft schedule throughout the year, both New York teams, and the Jets and the Giants. I guess Buffalo also New York, but it's Buffalo. And the Jaguars, very, very soft schedule. Over to the Pittsburgh Green Bay game, because I don't want to talk about that Baltimore game anymore. But Pittsburgh versus Green Bay fair by 6.5, 45.5 point total. Starting with Pittsburgh, we really need to see the status of the wide receivers. In terms of likeliness right now, it's starting with Deontay Johnson as the highest, oddly enough, after he missed week 3. Then Juju, and now Claypool was now more doubtful than ever with a DNP on the Friday practice. I don't believe I'm even ranking Claypool right now. It's just Deontay Johnson and Juju. Even then, I don't particularly love the Pittsburgh side in this. Now, this is a 4 p.m. start, so we will know before the later games, but have a backup in case the Hunter. I've been talking about Hunter Renfrow or any of the Raiders. It might be available on your waivers. Ruggs and Edwards are most likely rosters. But I've been talking about Renfrow. And Renfrow's got like a top 20 scoring right now in the season. It's just a lot of weird receivers for the first weeks, but Ben, nowhere near a start, but he's going to be better with the guys to make him look better. He looked shot last week. 58 pass attempts against Cincinnati, and you don't win. And the last play of the game is you dumping off to Najee Harris for like 2 yards, and it's just like, we surrender. The thing is, this is an offense that they're, Pittsburgh offensive coordinator comes out and said, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. If they have that many attempts, they're going to fall into production. There's going to be more juice in them than they were in week 3. Najee Harris, of course, was a big beneficiary of that. The highest targets only get 19. I'm not seeing any of that ridiculous target work in this one, but I do think he's going to be a top 10 running back. The only real player in Pittsburgh I have great confidence in this matchup against Green Bay. I do like the matchup here. But there's going to be some tough receiver play over on the other side. Was one of these receivers, Juju or Deontay Johnson or Claypool, is active, is still going to be drawing Jalen Alexander on most plays. So just something of note. Over to Green Bay. One of the more boring teams to talk about, kind of like always, like Kansas City. It's just like, can we just pick up what maybe like one of the worst matchups of the group? But Aaron Rodgers here. Is this a tough matchup, right? Because besides Kyler Murray, who we're all starting and living with the consequences no matter what's going to really go on with him, because supposedly this is a bad matchup for him. But Steelers today, kind of below average in terms of yards, scores, and only 1 interception on the season. So it's not particularly a defense that we're looking at saying, yeah, this is really the old Pittsburgh Steelers defense of old. But all the other quarterbacks in either neutral or to good matchups outside of Jackson and Murray, who we're really going to be looked at as like, all right, with the rushing that they do and all this sort of things that we can kind of look at and say, yeah, they're going to be good quarterbacks and do what they do. Rodgers, really one of the lower recommended starts he's going to ever have on this season. Quarterback 12 here for me. So really not something to say, hey, don't not start start Rodgers. Don't get away from it if you can. But there are better players at quarterback to rank than these guys right now. But looking at the rest of the Green Bay players, yeah, Aaron Jones, yeah, Devontae Adams, like those are always going to be starts for us. But Robert Tonyan, right, tight end. He can be sat, I think, pretty comfortably for both of the Philadelphia Eagles tight ends, Dawson Knox, Mike Gesicki. Failed to hit 10 yards in 2 of the last 3 weeks. 78% of his points came from his week 2 performance. He can be pretty comfortably passed on, I think, in this one. 2 of the last games on the docket. Tampa Bay versus New England. The big Tom Brady sort of situation. I'll say from New England, there's no real recommended starts in the 6.5 point favored for Tampa Bay, 49 point over under. They're there's obviously players you can play from here. Damian Harris, obviously, we know James White anymore. We want to see more out. Jonnu Smith has not had a very successful start to the season, and there's going to be a possibility for them getting into passing situations in this game. But I can't particularly say that I'm preferring any New England player over other spots where I can go out and look like, yeah, that's a better spot for this guy or that guy. New England, for me, not an offense that I think I'm very getting much exposure to in most of my lineups right now. I think there's just better options kind of over the place for these guys. But with the Tampa Bay side, we at least get some more focused work because Gronk is currently doubtful and Giovanni Bernard is out. So Gronk doesn't play, which is a big bummer because, a Gronk top 6 performance was what I was ranking him as. But a little bit more focus for Brady, who's currently a top 5 option for me, almost just solely based on hype. But it's a spot where a top 5 billing for him and pretty much makes, almost too much sense. Currently my quarterback 4 on the week. Of the receivers, though, all top 24 options now with Gronk basically going to be out. I am ranking Cameron Brate. Did see more snaps last week to OJ Howard. But Godwin, Evans, Brown, all top 24 for me in that order. The exact rankings for them, they're all lower than 15 because I think that's the one issue. Yeah, so 15 for Godwin, 19 for Evans, 22 for Brown. We saw this a few weeks ago when they were all active in week 2 after week 1 where Mike Evans faltered. Week 2 is where Antonio Brown faltered. It's going to be a spot again here where we're not particularly going to be 100% confident in how it's all going to be playing out for these guys, right? But for the running backs, prefer Fournette to Jones. We still have no real good understanding, I think, to this point of the running backs. As last week when they fell behind, they really then turned to Giovanni Bernard. So if we're still unable to really get a good grasp on who these running backs are, I'll at least cop to who they referred in the first 2 weeks, which was Leonard Fournette with Ronald Jones in the doghouse. So right now, that's how I'll be looking at for those guys. I would not be dropping Ronald Jones. I understand it if he's your worst player on your team, but it only takes any sort of real inclination for these guys to go at, side A or side B for one of these guys, hopefully to someday be a good fantasy asset. Bucs defense, I think, in a good spot right here. One last game as my voice starts to falter. I use that word a lot today. I don't know why. Las Vegas Raiders versus the LA Chargers. Chargers favored by 3.5. 52.5 point over under. One of the fantasy games of the week. We have a very good game to end it out on. Starting on the Vegas side, Derek Carr was inside my top 10 at one point, just outside of it now. Need to wait a little bit on the running backs, unfortunately. Because if Josh Jacobs is active, he would be my favorite of these guys. Otherwise, Peyton Barber at one point was looked at as a big waiver wire winner. But now with Jacobs practicing, there's a good spot that Barber is not going to have a Barber week like we were hoping for. He did see most of rushing work when he was preferred over Drake of the last 2 weeks. I do think Drake sees replacement work regardless of who is starting. If Jacobs is starting, it's Jacobs and him. And if it's Barber starting, it's Barber and him. RB3 option kind of no matter what. I do think it's a great matchup, one of the best rushing spots for running backs right now, with the LA Chargers being one of the poorest defenses against opposing running backs. And for the wide receiving options, of the 3, I prefer Ruggs inside my top 4, Edwards and Renfro right outside of it. They do mix these guys around quite a bit, and Darren Waller is their primary receiving option. We've kind of all seen that. All good replacement options to have if you do have some issues with the Pittsburgh receivers. We've seen some injury issues also going on. Some definitely keep up to monitor on it on Sunday morning as injuries come out around like 11:30 or so. And that's been when I update my ranks. And finally, finishing out with the LA Chargers. One big thing here, Mike Williams has finally found his way to the top 12. All 4 main Chargers are top 12 options here at their respective positions. I think there's a very huge game for both teams with currently the Kansas City Chiefs being 1 and 2. Because even though the Raiders are undefeated and the Chargers are 2 and 1 and just beat the Chiefs, that's the team to be in this division still. And even the Denver Broncos are undefeated as well. But I think their wins are a little bit not as valuable. I mean, the Raiders have gone out and beat Pittsburgh, and they've gone out and beat the Ravens and the Dolphins. Those are good quality wins. Definitely a big game here. But all 4 main chargers in good spots. Jared Cook outside my top 12. But if you're looking for a tight end stream, I do think he's a fine option again. But a lot of the work is going to, Williams, Eckler, and Keenan Allen. I believe it was something like 70% of the target share work last week went to these 3 guys. That's where they're looking at. That's who you should have in your lineups and with good confidence. So with that, as we're wrapping it up, big week coming up. You're 1 and 2 teams, you're 0 and 3 teams. Is definitely, you can still come back from these sort of, low win totals. But man, this is a big week. I'm hoping for some good scores. We've had some bad running back play the last week. So hopefully there's not too many excellent running back spots like there were in week 2 when we had all those injuries and it was not a good week at all. But I'm looking for better play from a bunch of teams and hopefully we get some good fantasy scores for sure. And with that, if it's the first time or the last time you join us, I thank you for joining me here on GR Weekly. I've been Matt McCarthy. And again, our schedule Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. You got me at 7:30 doing this show, 5:30 on Wednesdays off the grid. Next week, John June is off. He's going to be in St. Martin for his anniversary. So it's going to be me, possibly site founder, Jeff DiMatteo on the show. We got to still see on that one. Tuesdays and Thursdays, you got Gary and the crew doing Getting Defensive and Kyle, and sometimes Jeff on the weekend with the slate, breaking down all the DFS action, trying to win you some money. So with that, I have been Matt. Good luck.